Good evening, everybody, and welcome again to one of Parasol events. It's delightful to have you, so many of you here tonight. And the panel discussion this evening, may I just quickly introduce the artist. You have the paper about the short bio on artists, and starting from the right-hand side, Hossein Valamanesh, who currently lives and works in Adelaide, Australia. Koushna Navabi. Koushna lives and works in London currently, having had a whole crusade in LA and New York, and anyhow, she is now firmly settled for now in London. Sahand Hesamiyan, who lives and works in Tehran. Nazgol Ansarinia, the same. She works and lives and works also in Tehran, Iran. And Samiee, who kind of circulates around the world between Europe and Tehran. And it's just wonderful to have that combination. We are talking about those of Iranian artists who live abroad and they converse with their host countries, Iranian artists who live in Tehran, Iran, and that's where they have been born, although they travel quite a bit, but that's where they are. And Samiee, who is incorporate both at this very young age. So anyhow, welcome everybody. Basically, this event is a very fortunate occurrence that we could still catch the artists before they go away, and it, as you know, it is taking place in conjunction with the two exhibitions, The Spark Is You, Parasol unit in Venice, which took place, which started actually open in Venice on 8th of May, and is going to continue to be there during the biennial because it's a collateral event, and until 23rd of November. And now this particular exhibition here, Nine Iranian Artists in London, The Spark Is You, that's what they have in common actually. The two exhibitions are part of one single concept and one single project. And this exhibition going on until 8th of September. And for those of you who would like to come back to bring friends and get more acquainted to it, it's very important. We have also organized 6 consecutive weeks events, educational events, from architecture to film screening and even psychoanalysis. What is it? What does it mean to do an event of psychoanalysis in Tehran, actually? For many of you, it might be quite interesting. And that event happened actually thanks to Samiee. So there will be many interesting events, and there will be, what is constant in them is that Iranian artists or Iranian performers, Iranian scholars will be talking about their culture directly, about their history, about their everyday life, about what happens in their home country. So there is no intermediary. It comes straight from the thought and the mind of Iranian to you. And I hope many of those you will attend, and it will be enlightening for all of us. So tonight's event, without introducing really artists in more details, because you have all the information on your chairs already left, I would like to just place us a little bit in time. Sometimes in the early 70s, in 1973 to be exact, Hossein Valamanesh left his country to go to Australia. Amazing. that is not the time that people will leave the country. Their country, Iran. Iran was in full effervescent economical growth, was amazing. And as you all know, or maybe you don't know, but you can guess, the Persian culture is so incredibly rich that Iranians are totally infatuated with their own culture, in their own heritage. And definitely in the 70s, they really didn't think they wanted to go anywhere and live anywhere in the world than in Iran. Life is fun, job is full employment, more than full employment, and everybody's going well. So, Hossein, would you tell us, please, what made you to leave Iran?
How can I say? It was a personal reason, and it was for love rather than politics or social. And I immigrated to Australia because I had to chase up a beautiful young woman. And but things, and that was purely the reason. Everybody told me not to go, but I went. Things didn't work out. I stayed, studied, and fall in love again, and I've been there since. Went to university again. I mean, not again. Sorry, for the further studies. I had studied painting in the late '60s in Tehran, in the School of Fine Art for boys, which is a high school level. It's not a university level. However, in Australia, I was fortunate to go to Adelaide and also study in the university level. And yeah, in that sense, it was a kind of bit crazy, but was good madness that you follow. A bit like being an artist. It's kind of, you follow your love, and if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, at least you've tried.
That's wonderful. Did you consider that you will be living in Australia, or was that something you were
Of
going
course,
for a few years?
I went to follow this young lady, and I was hoping to be with her, but
how it
it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And but life takes you, and that's, I think,
Yes.
the reason I'm sort of sharing this very personal thing with all our friends here is just that was, I think, is the nature of being who we are. We just follow our own crazy paths, and somehow it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's. But if we don't try, we don't know.
All right. Now, you go back to Iran quite a bit.
Yes, I have been going back since
and
2002.
And there is, if I am not mistaken, there is a whole relationship between the art you create, and it brings a kind of fusion of your heritage, Iranian heritage, Persian heritage, and what your beautiful host country offers to you.
Correct.
So there is harmony between Iran, between the culture in Persia and Australia all the time in your work.
Yeah, I hope so. It is in a way, I don't really think too consciously about, oh, this is my Persian bit or Iranian bit and this is my Australian bit. It's just because my character, the way I think, has evolved through the history of me being born there and growing up, and then living in Australia and being surrounded by the nature there. And I'm kind of trying to see what common we have, rather than what is Iranian, what is Australian, and be it in materials I use or be it in concept I use, and that sort of may not be so apparent, but for the work behind us is the work that in 2000 and about maybe 10 years ago I was in Iran and I saw this ceiling of a mosque in Isfahan, and immediate thing for me wasn't thinking of Iranian culture, and I just saw indigenous Aboriginal art projected to this ceiling. But the way I'm looking at the world now through an Australian eye, as well as having that heritage behind me. And then I felt I have to do something about this, to point out this connection, how we actually more similar than different.
Great. Well, I'm going to leave some of those questions for the audience when it comes to Q&A, and I'm going to continue, and this time to Nazgol. bringing places in harmony has been in Hossein's work all along. Nazgol, through your work, as the audience enters the gallery, they experience something quite phenomenal, something a little bit disturbing, because they think, oh, these are all rubbles or something. Something has been destroyed, maybe just next door or something, and we brought it to the gallery, you know? But they are in fact not rubbles, but they something much more, something that has been very well studied, well planned, and you have thought greatly about the work, how they should be built. And I would like you to talk a little bit, not only about the installation in the first gallery as you come in, but the title is The Mechanism of Growth, Demolishing Buildings, Buying Waste, 2017. And then the two videos on Fragment 1 and Fragment 2, Demolishing Buildings, Buying Waste, equally 2017. Could you talk a little bit about the work and how, what that refers to? And is obviously there is something quite not that harmonious as in the work of Hossein.
Yes.
Behind us.
The complete
Please.
opposite.
Please.
So the work, the two works that you see downstairs are part of the series, which is called Demolishing Buildings, Buying Waste. And the title of the project comes from a phrase that is written over and over again on the walls of low-rise buildings in Tehran, and it's an advertisement for people who come in and demolish a building for you for free. Often it's possible that you also get a payment at the end, because anything that is valuable in the building, especially the metal scraps, are sold, and it's part of a large. This is a part of a larger business of demolishing buildings and building new ones. So for me, these sort of the text that is written with like a spray which always accompanies a mobile phone number. It's just a sign of a small sign of the huge change that Tehran has been going through over the past, we can say, I mean, Tehran has been going through a lot of changes, but maybe in the last 10, 12 years, the pace has been really fast. So the project tries to capture a moment in the cycle of demolition and construction where it's unclear which direction we're going. Because when you look at the city, it looks like there's a lot of buildings that are going up. But for every building that is going up, something has been taken down. So I'm interested to capture this moment, and I'm focusing on the demolition aspect of the cycle, because it's the one that is perhaps less noticed, because it happens quite fast. So for the project, I went inside a building that they were going to demolish and documented the whole process from day 1 to day 16, where the place went from a complete livable space. The building was 30 years old until it was completely gone.
Is there a necessity to constantly destroy, demolish, and build new buildings?
It's an economic cycle. What happens is that you often get an offer from let's say contractors or real estates, that they come and they pay for the construction, and the landowners or the people who own let's say the units in a 2-3 story building, they don't put any money in, but at the end of the process, instead of one apartment, they have 2. Mm-hmm. So it's a way of in a way,
so it's a business.
It's a business.
It's a serious business.
It's a business, and it's quite tempting. Mm-hmm. Usually, when it starts in a neighborhood, it just it takes the whole neighborhood with it, and as a result, the city has been changing so fast to a point where some areas are unrecognizable.
Hmm. Great. So in a way, your concern is very much a kind of like what happens in Tehran. It's a social changes happening, and that's what's so interesting in your work, because you really relate your environment. You really are very sharp and attentive to what is happening, and Tehran being your hometown, basically.
Mm-hmm.
In the Venice exhibition, for those who will go, the work of Nazgol Ansarinia and Ziba Ardalan, an artist who has been out of Iran for over 60 years and lives and works in Minneapolis. They're kind of juxtaposed, the two works. They really speak together to each other. Basically, the whole project has come into being because of that dialogue. Sorry, I have to speak into the microphone, but sometimes it's just easier not to. And it is it just to basically the way we Persians are brought up, educated from day one. We taking poetry, and the poetry has so important, so intensive that in our life, that basically that poetry guides us, teaches us, guides us how to think about life, our outlook in life, our philosophy, teaches us to be patient, teaches us always to weigh things, never be maybe in haste, never be totally absolute, but always to consider different elements when a fact happens. And so that is, in a way, that the work of Nazgol and Ziba Ardalan in Venice, they're really juxtaposed together because both artists are so conscious about what is happening in their environment, although they have totally a different outlook on life and life philosophy. Now coming to the urban life, architecture, I would like to take a special moment to talk to an artist for whom architecture in his work, in his sculptures, Sahand's work is here outdoor, as you can see, not here, but in the garden, actually, on the terrace, not on the balcony. And it's kind of thinking, maybe reflecting on his heritage as Persian, reflecting on the fact of what does it mean really Persian, and that's so beautiful, because many artists in this exhibition are reflecting on their heritage. What does it mean to be Persian? Whether it's architecture, whether other elements, it comes through all the time, or in the work of, for example, Samiee we see here behind us. There are other elements, there is storytelling, there's a lot going on. So, Zan, I would like to ask you for in a few minutes just to explain to us what is the essence of your work. The work on the terrace, basically the title is Nahan Khane 2017. Would you tell us, please, what does it mean, Nahan Khane, and could you tell us a little bit the essence of your work? What does it make you really to do that kind of work, please?
If I want to explain a little bit more about my work and my practice, I usually use the elements and the structural form of Iranian architect as my source for making the objects, the body of the piece. This piece that we have it here in the exhibition, Nahan Khane, is actually is from expanding and transforming a form in an Iranian architect that called is Tavize, that is a structural form to build a dome or a corridor or a then it is a very basic form that we have it in our architect, and I took that, changed it. As you can see, it's like a little bit two domes that combine to each other, and it's studying how Iranian houses, buildings actually function. There are almost 2 or 3 spaces inside each other always that we call it Andaruni, Biruni or Shahneshin. These are how they function and how they related to each other. I try to as presented as a skeleton, show the audience how they work and actually make them something for today.
The interaction.
Yeah.
And this duality, and that's what's so beautiful in the work of Persian artists. Somehow duality comes out all the time. And that's what really fascinated me. One of the reasons to do this exhibition, both in Venice and London, is that kind of those thoughts of duality. And Navakhane basically means the most private part in a temple.
Yeah, actually, in our culture, the phrase Nahankhane, I mean, it's have a meaning. We have it in our literature, in our talking, and it's a little bit more than something in the temple. You can have it in your room, actually, and it's when there is a meaning of that. There is a place that is very important to you, and you have a precious part of you in there.
Intimacy.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting for our audience, of course, to get a glimpse of that, because this is not something you see every day and you're faced with, and that is really typical of, shall we say, Persian culture, which actually preceded Islamic culture.
Yeah,
That always existed. That's a really very, very old, this fact of having this intimacy, that intimate space in Persia, the structure of the houses, even the outdoor spaces. There's always a little, very private environment where you have water and you have some greenery, some kind of basically greenery and garden or something small. But it just very important. It has always been an extremely important element, that intimacy, the intimate space, whether it's indoor or outdoor, isn't it? And your work really in many ways refer to that intimacy, that duality of
it depends on the project, but as you say, for this piece, it's as you say. I mean, Islam actually, when they go to the countries, they have affected the cities, and after a while, the culture of that region, it's finding its root and have effect on Islamic culture. And because of that, for example, the house in Morocco, it's different than the house we have in Iran or in Saudi Arabia. They are different. How they
Should we say that Persian culture never left us?
For sure, for sure. It's never left us, because if we want to compare Ottoman Empire to the Persian Empire and what had happened to them and how they are very different in architect and how they divided the spaces and how the people are connecting to each other. It's much different. I mean, the past culture of the people, it's always with them. I think we need to appreciate it, and we need to take it to our lives today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we keep many questions for you. I'm sure the audience will have a lot of questions. Now, Koushna, your work is downstairs, the tree trunk in front of the window you have seen. Part of it is covered by a gorgeous decorative kalim, which traditionally has always existed in that part of the world. So you left Persia. When did you leave?
I left in 1979.
79, and you went where to?
I went to New York.
To New York.
I lived in New York for a number of years, and then from there I went to Los Angeles. And after Los Angeles, I came to London. So I've just been,
Yeah. So what does it mean, your work, which is untitled, Tree Trunk?
yes.
So you took a piece of tree trunk, and what did you do with it?
Well, I go for a walk every day in the Heath, where I live in northwest London, and I see this tree trunk there every day, and I kept thinking that this tree trunk has to be in my studio. There's a sculpture coming out of the studio, this tree trunk. So I asked the park rangers to if I could have it, and they said, we'll bring it to your studio if you make us some cake. So I did. I made them some cake, and they had the thing, and they asked me, could you send us a picture after you've done the sculpture? And
Yes.
of course I didn't, because I thought it was too disturbing for them to see. What the piece represents is trauma, is vulnerability, is femininity, there's domesticity, the stitches in the kilim. It's very important for me that I do that myself every day, you know, kind of laboriously do the stitches. That's a big part of the work for me. And why it is the shape it is, I don't think I have an answer for that.
Koushna,
Yes.
do you think those are some nightmare, trauma, or something that inspires you to do something?
Well, the work, I mean, there's a lot that happens in our unconscious that we are not particularly in control of. I think that a lot of my work is about this kind of hyper biculturalness. So I have a deep understanding of what I have been brought up in my childhood with the Persian language, with the Persian culture, with Persian food, and it sits very strongly in my heart. And the language I've learned to be an artist with is a Western language. So bringing the two together, I'm always aware of bringing the two together in a simultaneously, in the way that they are in dialect with one another. And I think that the tree trunk, one would say, so the trunk comes from, you know, where I live, here in London, and the kilim is an antique kilim which was falling apart, and I put it together in that way.
And then there is a hole in the tree trunk. Did you actually make this hole? Or
Yes, I did.
You decided?
I decided on the hole. And that was about hollowness. And the hollowness is something that one could feel as this idea of belonging. Whether, whether how you can exist and belong. So the belonging, if for me personally, so I can, where do I belong? So if I go to Iran, I'm Iran, and with Iranian artists.
I was considering and planning this exhibition, this incredible duality in the work of Iranian artists, and the exhibition is the two exhibitions actually together, they're all about that duality, and yet that duality that makes you constantly to be in conversation with each other. It never leaves you. Thank you very much, Koushna. We come back to you, definitely. Sam, I was so fortunate to be introduced to the work of Sam, and we had many, many meetings for me to understand really the practice, and I was always fascinated the amount of knowledge that a young artist like you really had and what could offer, and I learned a lot about our own heritage from you, actually. So thank you very much. And what you have if you want, in the back there and in front of the window are kind of two étalages. Would you like to elaborate a little bit about the Daryai Noor, Sea of Light, Koh Noor, a mountain of light? There are two famous diamonds. The Koh Noor, which is a mountain of light, is in Iran, in Tehran, And the Sea of Light is here in London. So would you please elaborate on
Sure,
it?
you're very kind with me. I'm really humbled. And I learned so much from you. It's very kind of you to say that. So I knew kind of what I want to make for the exhibition. The title came later, and out of the very many conversations that we had. And indeed, it was very related to my long research on adab and adabiyat, which I started a few years back in Amsterdam, and I tried to apply the theories about adab, which is usually applied to literature. I tried to apply them to visual art, so not to adabiyat but to tajassumiyat, or try to reclaim adab that is mostly used for literature to be something that one could use to think about visual arts or architecture or performance art or other genres of the Western disciplines of art. And this came out of many conversations with many different thinkers and writers and philosophers, which each and every enriched the research in one way or another. So basically this came out of a question when the historian John Welshman, when I talked about adab, told me you're going to be busy for the rest of your life to understand what will be the meaning of adab in relation to visual art, but then you have to have an example so people can understand you. And right away I knew the example is Shahrzad of the 1001 Night. But the question then became, what would Shahrzad of the 1001 Night do if she wouldn't try to tell stories but try to paint? And that would be my
If you don't mind, I quickly
Sure.
ask whether everybody knows about the story of 1001 Night, I assume. And Shahrzad and her sister, of course, Dinazad, yeah.
Yes. So this was already in 2014-15.
Yeah.
And it took me many more years to understand that the very renowned Iranian theater director, writer, Mr. Bahram Beyzai has worked on the history of transmutation of Shahrzad and 1001 Night, starting from a very famous lecture of Jorge Luis Borges, where he talks about the influence of 1001 Night on the Western culture, the translations. But Borges only in footnote mentions the Persian origins of the 1,000 myths, where Mr. Beyzai follows up in the Book of Kings in Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, the founding father of the modern Persian in 9th century, going back to Zoroastrian past of the work and the pre-Zoroastrian origins of Indo-European origins of the two ladies in relation to the Dragon of Drought. To skip the very many years of the work, I arrived at the current title of the work, which is The Fabulous Theology of Kohinoor and the Fabulous Theology of Daryay Nur, which I tried to unmake rather than making the application of these two etymologies. So I tried to think of ways to think how this concretized, deadening, maddening name of Kohinoor and Daryay Nur, if it wants to reach to the status of Shahrzad and 1001 Night, where should it go? And that was for me to think of polytheist, pre-monotheism, mythological possibilities that is in framing of the framing, which Shahrzad brings to us,
Yeah.
right?
Do I understand properly that these two incredible diamonds had incredible past and in the
Right.
history, a lot of dramas, many wars, and they were very cherished diamonds, and they are in fact, is that Daryay Nur? That is actually a cursed diamond.
I think it's Kohinoor or basically both of them, I guess.
They're cursed, yeah,
They are
apparently,
cursed.
is that?
as you know, many people try to find ownership of these two stones. And what the story, I mean, this, I am indebted to Mr. Beyzai's research, because he says already in Greek times and Persian times, when a kingdom conquers another kingdom, they ask for the ab o khak, the water and the soil, which is, but then this soil and water, when they have voice, Arve Havak and Sange Havak, then they turn into these two ethicists, who are ethicists through their abilities of seduction and beauty and their,
that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
So.
But basically, in two monolithic diamonds, you bring a lot of connection in the Persian culture, a lot of stories. There are not only two diamonds, which somehow came to Iran through the king of Iran at that time conquered India,
Right.
and could have these two diamonds and brought it to Iran. One of them actually, I think, never came to Iran. Is Daryai Noor, and stayed somewhere and finally came to this country. So yes, but you bring in that a lot of elements in the Persian culture, basically.
Right.
The element of Shahrazad, and who seduced and enchanted the king, and in this way she saved her own life, and she wasn't executed. And at the same time, you bring the whole notion of dichotomy or dualities between land and water, mountain and the sea, and the whole made of anahita, a fish that you see there. Those fish are, in a very interesting way, are standing on their heads. Never seen that actually, because I thought fish, they just move like that,
Right.
no?
Right.
But in your work, they are standing on their heads. It's quite interesting, and yet a lot of strange things are happening here. But you just let yourself, when you observe these two pieces of works, you just let yourself go and be totally seduced by the movement, the beauty, exuberant colors, and vibrancy of the work. It is an experience for visitors rather than really seeing an artwork. It's more than observing an object, isn't it?
Absolutely, right.
Yeah.
Also, what would be interesting to add, I think, to many things that I just mentioned, and dear Helen, you helped very much to summarize this in the great caption that is put for the work, but I think at least it would be interesting to say that my research into Manichaean religion, which was a religion, pre-Islamic religion, that was an attempt to make a cosmopolitan religion out of Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and Christianity, by a prophet who called himself a painter prophet, led me to find later that actually the origin of Manichaean religion is another Zoroastrian reform movement from a few centuries before Manichaean religion, called Zorvanism, the religion of Zorvan, who was the god of time.
And I think Manichaean came all the way to Europe.
To Europe and to China. Very
so
fascinatingly, they went to both sides of Eurasia, to North Africa as well, and they were very influential in Europe, in China, in Japan. When you see in Japanese or Chinese tapestries or illustrations a Jesus, you know that's a Manichaean religion. They had 3 Jesuses, and it's a very, very fascinating polytheist religion. But Zorvan was even more interesting, and Zorvanists, because Zorvanists, and Zorvan was what brought me to these, and I think with the fish that is standing, that was the relation that in 1001 Night, Shahrazad doesn't only tell a story the way that Hollywood would tell you hundreds of endless stories. Hollywood doesn't do the work of Shahrazad. Shahrazad tells stories within stories. frames the frame, therefore makes a new framework for time, for seduction, for ethics. I would also mention the psychoanalytic title of a book written by Dr. Ziba Ardalan. It's called the ethical seduction of the analytic situation on the feminine maternal origins of the responsibility for the other.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This Copernican revolution of the person being the center, the other one, the one that you adapt yourself to make a relationship brought me to this Zorvanism, and all that can be studied much further than.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think we are going to leave some questions to the audience. And now here the exhibition actually is 9 Iranian artists. We are here only 5 of wonderful Iranian artists here in the exhibition. 2 could not get visa to come to their opening, which was last night, sad. And 2 had already leave London. So, but just talking to 5 different Iranian artists here, I guess the audience has an idea how different, how incredibly just different this work of these artists are, and the richness. Of course, Iran is a country 3 times size of France, very large, and there have been many cultures there. But what really brings us together, this whole depth, what we saw and just heard from Sam about the work, this complexity, it all comes from our heritage, and our heritage of poetry, this splendid tradition of poetry which lasted for thousands of years. That has taught us also, although we are so different, we can still think along the same line, the complexity.